Bitcoin's essentially a ticking time bomb. I think Bitcoin is in deep value territory right now. Gold and AI have sucked the dollars out of the Bitcoin market, and so that's what makes me extremely bullish on Bitcoin at this point. I think that's why the central banks are completely missing the boat on Bitcoin. They are like building up a massive cavalry force. Meanwhile, Bitcoin is just like lots of nuclear weapons, right? It's completely disproportional what's going to happen here. They're going to get massacred financially. And so what needs to happen going forward is that the Congress needs to pass the Bitcoin Act. It actually creates a sovereign custodial system for Bitcoin for the United States. Private keys in space, private keys in the Mariana Trench, and nuclear submarines. We need to level up as a country. If we're going to survive in the digital age in the 21st century, we can't be losing Bitcoin. We can't be selling it.
And just lightning today. So what's your take on it in 2026?
It is stronger than ever. The fact that it's permissionless, I think that it'll become the default electronic cash for AI systems.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Bitcoin News channel. I'm your host, Rob Wallace, and today I'm very grateful to be joined by Pierre Rochard. Pierre is a man whose career has shaped Bitcoin as much as Bitcoin has shaped him. From the Nakamoto Institute to Kraken to Riot and now the Bitcoin Bond Company, Pierre has touched every layer of the Bitcoin ecosystem and helped define how we understand it today. Pierre, how you doing?
Thank you, Rob. That was a very generous introduction.
No, absolutely. I think you are one of the first people that plebs find when they enter into the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And so you've got so many different facets of your journey with Bitcoin, and I'm very excited to look into them today. But as we start off this conversation, I would love to get your opinion on what is going on with gold. We see it adding multiple Bitcoin market caps in just this week alone. So tell us, why is gold up at $5,500 right now?
Yeah, I think that it really comes down to foreign central banks and their appetite to buy gold as kind of the primary catalyst. And then we've also seen news that Tethers is buying gold, and there's lots of obviously smaller private buyers that are piling onto the momentum that is just driving the gold price bananas. So I think that when I look at it, I think that foreign central banks are making two big mistakes. One is that they think that the new Trump administration is a destabilizing force that increases the risk of holding dollar-denominated assets, and so they're mistakenly fleeing that to go to something more neutral like gold. I actually think that the Trump administration and its foreign policy might end up actually being the opposite of for some people they might see this negatively, others positively, that they're actually going to reinforce the dollar standard, and then they'll look back in 3 years and scratch their heads of why they piled into gold at the top. And the second mistake they're making is really fighting the last war, right? So old generals, they always fight the last war. They learn history. They learn how to respond to history. They don't learn how to respond to the present and the future. And so I think that's why these central banks are completely missing the boat on Bitcoin. They are like, building up a massive cavalry force, right? To as their military. Meanwhile, Bitcoin is just like lots of nuclear weapons, right? So it's completely disproportional what's going to happen here. They're going to get massacred financially, obviously, monetarily, not physically. Not physically, actually, I think that they'll do very well. They'll go retire in a tropical island or whatever. And so the central banks, I think, are completely misguided in their approach here. The second part of it, I think, is also one about industrial use. So gold and silver are actually inputs into industrial processes. Obviously around electronics, right? It's a very conductive material, has lots of interesting properties. And I think that the physical demand for the utility is also contributing to the gold price going up. Ultimately, what's going to happen is that the high gold price creates large profit margins for gold miners, and then that's a signal, that's a market signal for there to be more gold mining to happen. And more gold mining will happen. They will extract more gold from the earth, dilute the above ground supply, and ultimately stabilize or drive down the price of gold. So I don't think it's sustainable long term over the next 20 to 50 years. But in the short term, it certainly does mean, I believe, that there's a lot of capital that is kind of just momentum capital. And so they kind of chase returns. They chase whatever has gone up fastest over the past 12 months. And so they're piling into gold when in the past they might have been piling into GameStop or Bitcoin or SHIB or all sorts of different assets. So that I think is what's going on with gold. And that, for Bitcoin, I think it's really important for us to realize something, which is that we create all these narratives about, if you long term, Bitcoin volatility is going to decrease, right? We've got decreasing marginal returns. And so it's like, and historically, 3 years ago, we would say, look at gold, right? Gold doesn't move around as much as Bitcoin does. It's not as volatile as Bitcoin because it's become a bigger asset base. I think that's all just like cognitive rationalization of like what's going on. It's not, I don't think it's an actual description of reality, which is that the volatility can be volatile, meaning that, gold can have this moment. Bitcoin's had this moment, let's say 3 times already, right, in past halving cycles. So I think Bitcoin's essentially a ticking time bomb. Like the spring is extremely compressed. I think Bitcoin is in deep value territory right now, and that gold, precious metals, and AI have sucked the dollars out of the Bitcoin market and into their markets, right, because of their short-term returns. And so that's kind of what makes me extremely bullish on Bitcoin at this point, is that there will be a rotation into Bitcoin, and I think it will be really a massive rip, and will catch people off sides. People will hate it.
Yes, hated rallies. Those are the ones that are the most explosive, and it does feel as if Bitcoin is just completely ignored at this point. And so for the store of value thesis to be back in the mainstream, it's just a matter of time before people realize that there's a better store of value out there. And so when we see gold doing this, though, it does seem as if there's something seismic shifting beneath our feet, right? We are entering into a new monetary paradigm. And as we see, our debt is over $38 trillion. Larry Lepard brought this up recently, is the idea of a hard monetary reset, where on a Friday night, the banks close down. Over the weekend, the government announces we're going to reprice Bitcoin to $1 million and gold to $25,000. Instantaneously, just doing one fell swoop devaluation of the dollar against these hard assets. What do you think is the probability of something like this happening? Is it feasible? And what is the fallout for the average person if something like this does happen?
Well, I don't really see it because gold and Bitcoin are freely floating against the dollar, so there's not like an impetus to have that kind of reset. The reset can happen without the government doing anything. But I'm actually pretty optimistic on the fiscal outlook for the U.S. For 2 reasons. One is growth. So GDP growth has exceeded expectations. I think it's running at 5% annualized right now, which is just a phenomenal number for the U.S. And I think that actually is going to increase because of AI. And so I think that the growth picture is far better than it was, again, 3 years ago, abysmal. 2 is spending. So if they can get the spending under control and, have fewer dollars going in towards fraudulent schemes that are enriching some folks in society, and cut the deficit, And so I think that if they're collecting more taxes because there's an economic boom happening, because there's been the biggest technological breakthrough in human history, right? Combined with really, cutting spending domestically, I think that could actually set things up pretty well for the U.S. dollar. And the only caveat would be on military spending. So they've announced that they're going to increase military spending. Whether that ends up being inflationary or not, I think is really going to depend on how intelligent the military spending is. Because if they spend that on like autonomous drone swarms, I think that they could get a lot of bang for their buck and not, essentially take resources away from the rest of the economy, which is always the concern in creating inflation with an increase in spending. But yeah, so I think that the hard reset scenario to me seems like a really low probability one at this point. If Kamala had gotten elected, sure, that's plausible because she would have banned AI and raised taxes and all of that. So, but at this and increased spending massively, right? Because today we talk about the fraud being like billions of dollars. I think she would have made sure that the fraud increased to trillions of dollars, right? She would have made sure that the United States would be bankrupted sending money to scammers. Which, as Bitcoiners, it's like, yeah, we know that there's a lot of scammers out there. There's an infinite supply of scammers. Just put up a sign and say, so I think that things are looking much better. Now, what they have to figure out is the strategic Bitcoin reserve. All right. So unfortunately, there was some news out recently that $20 million or so had been stolen from the U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve. I was really disappointed by the lack of alarm at this. It's basically like we lost the nuclear codes, type situation. And they were outsourcing it to some no-name company nobody's ever heard of, and the son of the CEO stole the Bitcoin. So this is a really catastrophic situation. It's a national humiliation. And so what needs to happen going forward is that the Congress needs to pass the Bitcoin Act. Not because of, and let's be clear, they could amend the Bitcoin Act to not purchase any Bitcoin, and it would still be the most important legislation for Congress to pass, within the next 30 to 90 days. It's just bizarre that it hasn't made any forward progress. And the reason why it's extremely important to pass is that it actually creates a decentralized sovereign custodial system for Bitcoin for the United States operated by the US military, right? So that way we kind of can cross out the problem of outsourced CEO's son steals $20 million and instead have the most sophisticated multi-sig system that is militarized, right? It would be a military-grade custodial system, far better than Fort Knox, right? Because we know that Bitcoin's cryptographic technology enables better solutions than gold, right? Vaults, right? So we can create something that involves private keys in space, private keys in the Mariana Trench and nuclear submarines, Cheyenne Mountain. The U.S. military is the global superpower, right? It's so. I think that the person who stole the Bitcoin obviously needs to be prosecuted. The people who were involved in the decision-making process need to be heavily scrutinized, right, and held accountable. Because we need to level up as a country. If we're going to survive in the digital age in the 21st century, we can't be losing Bitcoin. We can't be selling it. And so I think that there's a bit of a lack of urgency and focus. Instead, there seems like Congress is distracted by stable coins. Who cares? It's immaterial compared to the importance of Bitcoin. Or they're distracted by tokenization of Wall Street assets. Again, complete distraction, right? They need to refocus and recenter on the geostrategic value of accumulating as much Bitcoin as possible in as shortest period of a time. First secure what we have, secure it, and then second, start accumulating. But the fact that we're not even close on security, I mean, it's just, and we're more than 1 year into President Trump's term here, so I think that needs to be squared away a lot more quickly than it has been.
100%. We had the strategic Bitcoin Reserve executive order come out last March. We were supposed to have an audit. And articles came out of the Times saying that the U.S. Marshals are really bad at keeping track of this Bitcoin. And this news story that you said from this week is the perfect example of that. Why do you think we haven't had that audit?
I think that at the highest levels, it's just not being taken seriously enough. So I have a lot of respect for David Sachs. He's kind of the point person on AI and crypto. I think that his role should be split into two, or maybe even three, right? So he can do the AI stuff. He can, focus on that. That's great. The crypto stuff, I don't know that anybody should be working on it. I think it's just a complete distraction. And then they need a Bitcoin SAR, right? They need somebody who's the point person who is, at the highest levels of government, responsible for implementing the national Bitcoin strategy and doing it with a sense of urgency, right? Not doing it as like, oh yeah, we'll get to it later, or we'll get to it when JD Vance is president or whatever. No, it has to happen now. And any delay, I think, actually undermines U.S. national security, and it's just completely unacceptable. So I think it's a lack of focus is really the problem. And obviously, there's no shortage of resources, right? There's just a shortage of agency.
And you have said just now that you believe that we are in a good position, that we're about to see this economic boom. AI is going to bring productivity up to levels we have never witnessed before. You have, of course, a background in computers. You know how to code. How are you using AI, and how has it changed your day-to-day?
It's completely changed it. I don't write code anymore. And so there was this phase where it was like, oh, I'll let the AI write the code, but I want to read the code and understand it and actually be supervising it. I've moved past that. I've accepted that the code is, not something that I should ever be looking at. Then it's all about really essentially developing a mini, not a mini, actually, it can be very large, a corporation, right? So you have AI agents that have different employee roles that, are all just working in synchrony. And so I think we're just scratching the surface on all of this, and that, I'm even trying to figure out how to upgrade my GPUs at home so I can be doing more. So I think that there's a huge distance, and this is obviously the same with Bitcoin, right? You compare a Bitcoiner who understands Bitcoin, who's used Bitcoin, who's run a Lightning node, who's, held their own keys, has done Bitcoin data analysis, Bitcoin research, and then the guy on the outside who's it's tulip mania. They're operating in completely different realities, right? They have completely different sets of facts. And so I think the same thing is happening in AI, where there's people who are not using it, or they're using it incorrectly. They're using, I don't know, the Ethereum equivalent or whatever. And it's not working for them. And then there's the people who actually are figuring it out and using it productively. And the gap is just widening and widening, right? Where now the information asymmetry is just increasing every day. And I feel like I'm falling behind. And then I get some reality check where I'll see somebody tweet something and I'm like, oh no, I'm not falling behind. I'm, 90th percentile here, with all humility, that it's very exciting. I think that the big question is why spend any time fiddling around with AI today instead of waiting 6 months? It'll be better in the future, right? People talk about deflation. It's kind of the same dynamic.
It's all getting easier. The abilities are all growing in capability on a weekly basis. It's absolutely amazing. And Elon says that we're going to be in a world of infinite abundance because of it. where people are all going to have high universal income. Do you see this coming to fruition, and how does Bitcoin fit into that?
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen from a income perspective for the broad population.
I wanted to briefly interrupt today's interview to give a big shout out to our lead sponsor, Rhino Bitcoin. Rhino is the all-in-one Bitcoin super app built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Buy or sell instantly. Send sats anywhere on the Lightning Network. Withdraw straight to cold storage. Even turn sats into gift cards or link to a Casa multisig, all within one sleek interface. And Rhino is just warming up. Soon, you'll pay bills, borrow against your Bitcoin, and save for retirement, all without leaving the app. Download Rhino at rhinobitcoin.com or tap the link in the description below. Use promo code Bitcoin News and Rhino will drop you $10 of free Bitcoin into your account today. Secure your stack with Rhino Bitcoin and enjoy the rest of the video.
I think, though, that, when I was learning about Bitcoin, and let's say like 2013, I'm reading up on Bitcoin. I'm telling my now wife, my girlfriend at the time, next year the US dollar will not exist anymore. Okay, it's just going to be Bitcoin everything. It's such obviously good technology, and everybody has access to this information on the internet. It's all open source. Obviously, everybody's going to adopt it within the next 12 months, right? So that didn't pan out. And so I think that the society will just start kind of spreading out, where there's some people who are using AI lots, or they're not, and they're using humans, right? They're hiring people. So like there's still people going to be hired. So it's just like the US dollar didn't go away. Human workers won't go away. They'll still be there. But the people who are using AI a lot will have a bit of this like secret superpower, just like with Bitcoin's number go up technology, right? You've got millennials that, sped run ahead of boomers or whatever, just by holding the right asset instead of holding, I don't know, just the wrong asset, real estate, something like that. So, I think that it'll increase, not inequality from a monetary perspective, but inequality maybe from a life experience perspective, where the AI people just kind of be thinking and behaving and operating on a different level, where they've automated so many things, they've got more time for I don't know, prayer, family, like other things than just sitting at a desk and staring at a screen and doing manual accounting work or something like that.
Yeah, so let's then go back to what you just said. In 2013, when you had your eyes opened to Bitcoin and you thought the world was going to change instantaneously, I don't know your orange pill story. What is it that opened your eyes to Bitcoin and got you into that state of Bitcoin ecstasy?
Yeah, so before Bitcoin existed, I was interested in Austrian economics, monetary economics, the business cycle, open source software, Linux, and I didn't really think those two would really mix together ever. And so I was, the reason I majored in accounting was because I was so interested in Austrian economics, and they emphasized the importance of accounting for the entrepreneurial business process. That the way you figure out what is the highest value you can provide to society is by looking at the price system and figuring out what's the highest profit opportunity, right? And whatever the highest profit opportunity is actually the best thing for you to work on. Now, obviously within a moral framework, right? So you got to put that into context. So, maybe working as a hitman and, getting paid millions of dollars, not the right way to go. You got to respect other people's property rights. But that's kind of the concept, and I think it really broadly holds true. And then at the end of 2012, I was actually a part of a Austrian economics reading club at the University of Texas called the Mises Circle with Michael Goldstein, who was kind of running the operation. And we started debating banking and full reserve banking versus fractional reserve banking. Lots of different views within the group on it. And then, Bitcoin came up. And that Bitcoin's monetary policy was only going to be up to 21 million Bitcoin. And that really, that's kind of what flipped the switch in my head, because I had thought about this idea that if you could get a money that was actually a fixed supply, that would actually be better than gold or silver, because their supply is always increasing. And so when I downloaded Bitcoin and saw that it was like open source vibes, I immediately knew that if the monetary policy is enforced with open source, consensus mechanism, then, and the cryptography is sound, this was going to definitely increase in adoption. You've got just the perfect money with a digital payment system. It's obviously going to do well. And so, yeah, that's kind of what got me going down the rabbit hole.
It's funny how life works that way. You can have all these different interests, and then one day they all just come together, and your life takes a completely different trajectory. And then eventually you find yourself at Kraken, working on the Lightning Network and product development there. What was it like in the early days of Lightning, and what is your modern take on Lightning in 2026?
Yeah, so before joining Kraken, I actually, so this is like, I believe 2018, I came across Jack Mahler's, he was working on a Lightning project. And I was watching his videos and I thought, well, okay, that's interesting, because in 2014, when the Lightning white paper had come out, I glanced it over and didn't think much of it. I thought, these guys are missing the point. The whole point of Bitcoin is that it's sound money. All this payment stuff, who cares? As long as you've got enough transactional capability to have checks and balances on custodians, essentially, kind of the Hal Finney vision, or that we could just scale on chain. Because even though I was always a small block proponent and continue to be so, I think that as technology improves, there will be more transaction throughput on chain, and there has been, right? We saw SegWit, we saw even Taproot increase on-chain efficiency. So I was kind of a Lightning agnostic until 2018. So 4 years of the Lightning developers working on it before they won me over. And then Chaincode Labs advertised a Lightning Residency. So they're like a research group based out of New York City, where I was living at the time. And I thought, wow, that would be really cool to work on a Lightning project and get to meet some of the leading Lightning protocol researchers and hear what they have to say in greater depth. So they want you to work on a project as part of the residency. The project I chose was a C# XL plugin for communicating with your Lightning node from Microsoft Excel. Because as an accountant, Microsoft Excel is kind of where you live. That's your most comfortable home base. And then the challenging part. So it worked very well. And in fact, I was just thinking that now with AI, I need to actually kind of direct the AI's attention towards the plugin and like bring it into 2026 and relaunch it. But the challenge was running a Lightning node on Windows, right? Microsoft Excel, you're on Microsoft Windows. Running a Lightning node at the time was not easy. Because you also have to run a Bitcoin node, and they have to communicate with each other. So I built a wrapper around that called the Node Launcher, and then the Node Launcher took off, and people were downloading the Node Launcher and joining the Lightning Network. And then people would be like, well, okay, I joined the Lightning Network, but what do I do? Like, who do I connect to? And so then I created a Lightning routing node and deployed that and had one of the largest routing nodes, routing payments around early days. And that's when Kraken reached out and suggested that we work together because they really wanted to deploy Lightning. And so it took a while. It's a circuitous route. But eventually we did get Lightning launched. to millions of users worldwide. It instantly got use, right, and traction, and it instantly became one of the largest routing nodes on the network. Still, obviously running at full steam. It was interesting that when I was working at Kraken, one of the projects that they had in the pipeline was an NFT marketplace. And it was like, we were kind of launching these simultaneously. And then I recently found out the NFT marketplace shut down. The Lightning node is still going strong. I thought was an interesting development afterwards. So, that was kind of my experience at Kraken.
And just Lightning today, is it stronger than ever? There's some detractors, but it seems as if it's getting interoperability with Arc, and continues to grow. So what's your take on it in 2026?
It is stronger than ever. And so I think that what we'll see is that the fact that it's permissionless and it's just so programmable that I think that it'll become the default electronic cash for AI systems. Now, as with everything, it'll take time. It might take decades for this to unfold. But I also, it's funny, I was catching up on the latest newsletter from Alex Bosworth about kind of the developments on Lightning Labs side on LND. And I was like, wow, there's so many different moving parts to this. It's getting so complicated. Actually, we might need AI to make Lightning continue to advance on every frontier, because there's just not enough highly skilled software engineers to be able to do it, old school way. So I'm excited to see kind of the velocity just like massively accelerate, where the Lightning value proposition is just going to continue to scale up and up, and it'll get easier and easier to use.
So with Lightning, you used your software capabilities, and then you went to Riot and were in the hardware aspect of Bitcoin. Big weekend storm we just had in America, across the country. Texas got very, very cold, and yet it was able to keep their grid on because of some of the work that you helped to do while you were there at Riot with ERCOT and Bitcoin mining. So could you tell us, what is the relationship between the grid and Bitcoin miners, and how has that changed over the last 3 years?
Maybe months before we launched Lightning at Kraken, China banned Bitcoin mining. And so a lot of the mining rigs started getting shipped to the US, and the US market share for Bitcoin mining started growing at a very rapid pace. Elizabeth Warren became aware of this situation. I don't know how or what or why, probably some environmentalist group or something. And decided to start an all-of-government attack on Bitcoin mining, and to apply maximum pressure on U.S. Bitcoin miners to push them offshore, right, to get rid of them. She doesn't like Bitcoin, and so really anything related to Bitcoin, it's almost pretextual, right? It's like she doesn't even really care about the carbon emissions. She just doesn't like Bitcoin. Elizabeth Warren does not care about money laundering, except if it's relating to Bitcoin, right? So if you look at, and this is, keep in mind, like Senator Warren is a person who has been deep in the weeds on financial regulatory matters for decades, has never said anything about money laundering until she saw it as a way to attack Bitcoin. Because if anything, should really be on the opposite side of the fence, right? Of saying there's too much KYC, we need to have a more inclusive financial system. That would be her natural predisposition towards money laundering matters. Anyway, so first thing she did was send letters to all of the Bitcoin miners, all of the publicly traded large Bitcoin miners, asking them all sorts of questions, about their carbon emissions and all this. And so I was at the Bitcoin Miami conference, and Riot's management, and we knew each other because I was on an advisory board for Riot, approached me and asked me to come in-house as the VP of research to really kind of develop the intellectual firepower for fighting back against Elizabeth Warren, because if left unchecked, she could have made a lot more progress than she did, right? And when you talked with Bitcoin mining investors at the time, the number one risk that they would highlight was regulatory risk. So there was a need to really develop an advanced public policy strategy to push back on Elizabeth Warren. And, rights management knew that I was the right person to lead that for the company because of my activities on social media, on Twitter at the time, right? Like, they saw clearly that I had the fight in me to actually argue with people online. There's a lot of people who don't like confrontation, right? So they don't like politics. They don't like arguing with people. They don't like debating. They have misconceptions about debating, right? They think it's about persuading your opponent when really it's about winning in the court of public opinion. And so they were excited to bring me on board. I was excited to join and to do this because I had never worked in Bitcoin mining before. I understood Bitcoin mining, right? Like, I understood proof of work. I understood why, and I also was pro energy. So I understood why there was like it was good that more Bitcoin mining was coming to the United States because it was developing energy infrastructure. So I was already very predisposed to wanting to fight this fight. I'm also a climate realist, whereas, Elizabeth Warren is like Greta Thunberg levels of delusional anti-scientific views on climate change. So it was exciting to kind of be able to push back on something like that on climate change, where it's like, you don't get those opportunities very often. So joined Riot. First thing we did was write a letter back to Congress, right, and really explain what the value proposition of Bitcoin is. Right? So, because I think like there's this misconception sometimes, and this is perhaps why a lot of the public policy around Bitcoin mining was really not hitting the target, is that they would talk about, we're expanding into renewable resources, right? We're building like windmills, and so that was actually a dead end. That was a losing argument, because the immediate retort was, the new windmills should go towards shutting down coal plants, not towards more Bitcoin mining, right? So and then what do you say to that? So it was a complete dead end. It was just not a good idea to go down that path. And so because the other point is that they view Bitcoin as useless. It's tulips. It's beanie baby. Any amount of energy consumed, any amount of resources or time consumed by Bitcoin is wasteful, even if there's no carbon emissions. So that was a complete losing argument, because the carbon emissions is a facade behind their belief that Bitcoin's useless. And so really what I wanted to focus on was actually going towards the direction of Bitcoin has tremendous value. So even if there's some marginal carbon impact, there's marginal carbon impact from Christmas lights, right? But there's value in Christmas lights, right? So there's value in video games, right? We could get rid of video games to decrease carbon emissions. So once you shift the debate to one of utility, and then they'll say, we don't need sound money. All right, well, now we're having a real political debate. So that you're going to lose, right? Because it's interesting. Moderate Democrats actually are not opposed to Bitcoin. Moderate Democrats actually hold Bitcoin. They like it. It's only the radical Marxist, quote unquote, progressives, right? They're not progressives, actually. What they want to do is return to a state of nature, right? They're primitivists. They're anti-progressive. If you actually look at what their ideology is, they call themselves progressive as an inversion. And so these Neanderthal Marxists want to destroy human civilization. Ideally, they would eradicate the human race, right? That's their Gaia ideology about returning to Mother Nature, and so it's an anti-human ideology. But they are maybe less than 10% of the population. Thank God, because if we would probably be in open warfare if there were a greater percentage than that. But that loses at the ballot box. So ultimately, what we set up was such that in 2024, two things happened. One is that the end game for Elizabeth Warren came to a head. Her strategy for canceling the Bitcoin miners in the United States was to have the Department of Energy gather information about who is selling electricity to Bitcoin miners, and then giving that information to activists to then go and lobby and pressure energy companies to cancel those contracts, right? And to go upstream and kind of like break Bitcoin mining from a electricity supply perspective. And that would work because the electricity companies, they would look at it and they say, okay, Bitcoin miners, like, they're not a material percentage of our sales. Like, okay, we don't want the controversy. We want to be ESG, DEI, fully compliant. So we're going to do whatever Elizabeth Warren tells us to do because we just got caught, selling electricity to the wrong people. And it's interesting. Some people in the Bitcoin mining industry said, all right, let's do it. Let's hand over all of our information. What are you going to do? It's the government. But what you have to do, which is exactly what I did personally, I immediately started doing research. And I started digging into what were the particular intragovernmental processes by which they were creating this information survey. And what were kind of some of the potential legal problems, deficiencies with their process. And I noticed that in order to ram through the survey and make it immediately mandatory, they had declared a state of emergency. They said that the Bitcoin price was going up so much, that the electricity usage was going up so much, that they were going to destabilize the United States power grid and cause a societal problem, right? And so all of that makes a ton of sense if you don't understand the electrical engineering, right? Which thankfully I had been at Riot for a while at that point. So, and I'd been involved with ERCOT. I'd attended ERCOT meetings. I talked with ERCOT engineers. I talked with academics at electrical engineering PhDs. Really had learned a lot about what's going on with how large scale loads integrate into the Texas grid. And so I immediately knew that this argument for an emergency would actually not be able to hold up in court. And so if we were to sue the government and litigate that there is no emergency, then they would actually have to back down and go through proper channels, which would take far longer than what they were trying to do, right? And would actually require them to engage stakeholders, i.e. the people filling out the survey, before forcing them to fill out the survey through administrative procedure, right? Public notice and comment. Very obvious things, right? That, okay, we're going to require you to fill out the survey. We'd like your feedback on the survey before we make you do it so that this is actually serving for the common good, for the public interest. And so, regardless of what you think about government or regulations, like that is the internal logic by which they operate. Thank God, right? Otherwise, we'd be in a completely tyrannical system with no checks and balances. And so we filed suit, Riot did. We filed suit against the federal government, against the Department of Energy in federal court. And the lawsuit was basically just pointing to ERCOT and saying, hey, if adding large loads to the electricity grid poses an emergency, a risk of any kind, it would be caught by ERCOT. ERCOT has load studies that they perform before ever connecting a large load to the grid. They would never connect a large load if that created a risk for the grid. Their name is the Electrical Reliability Council of Texas. They would never jeopardize that, especially after what happened with Winter Storm Uri, where the electricity grid in Texas went down for 5 days, right? So ERCOT is already extremely conservative from an electrical engineering perspective. And so the Department of Energy's accusation is that ERCOT is negligent, which is a whole other can of worms from a, legal perspective, if that's their argument. And that, that the judge looked at it, and the judge is up in Waco, Texas. I drove up there. I was ready to testify on behalf of Riot. It didn't come to that, unfortunately. It would have been fun to do some Q&A with some lawyers. But the judge looked at it, and he immediately ruled in our favor, and immediately said that the government had to cease and desist. They had to a restraining order put on them. They had to delete any data that they'd already received. They had to go back to the drawing board. And the Biden administration immediately folded, right? They didn't put up a fight. And I thought that was interesting. I think that Elizabeth Warren got a bit ahead over her skis. And I think that there was not really a strong coordinating mechanism within the executive branch that would have deconflicted this situation before it became a situation. I think that, you've got these ideologues who are like, yeah, Bitcoin mining is an emergency. And then the lawyers who are maybe a little more grounded be like, yeah, you might think so in your bubble, but here we got to defend this in court. You're sending us into a losing battle. If we lose this battle, it could actually be, there's further ramifications to doing that. So, and then immediately after that happened, President Trump won the November election. So, and he won that election partly because of how much resources went from Bitcoin miners into public policy to fight Elizabeth Warren. A lot of money went into the Trump campaign war chest and all of the associated ground battles, including Senator Bernie Moreno to replace the banking senator who was a Democrat who was just awful, and he got replaced by Bernie Moreno. So anyway, come January inauguration day, the world had completely changed for Bitcoin mining from when I joined the company, when we were kind of under attack and needing to defend, to now it was a non-issue, right? Nobody cares about Bitcoin mining anymore. In fact, the Bitcoin miners themselves, they're all pivoting towards AI, right? So even within the industry, they don't really care about Bitcoin mining anymore. So, and so that's where, it was not because of my own efforts, because there was a lot of other people involved. Credit to them. I think what I deserve credit for is really just on the New York Times article. So as part of this pressure campaign on Bitcoin miners, obviously Elizabeth Warren had her cronies, her propagandists at the New York Times, which is a discredited blog, come after Bitcoin miners. And they put out this hit piece that actually had severe, deliberate misinformation in it. They photoshopped the picture of the Bitcoin mining facility to make it look hazy, like there's some kind of pollution coming from it, when really there's no pollution over there. It's actually blue, clear skies. So when they came out with this article, I decided to record a 2-minute clapback video explaining that Bitcoin mining actually has zero emissions, just like a Tesla electrical vehicle. And on our main corporate account, we replied with this video of me, being Bill Nye the Science Guy with a CO2 meter, and we immediately ratioed the New York Times because the environmentalists were outraged because instead of apologizing to them, right? That's what they want. You had a New York Times hit piece. You need to apologize now. You need to say, oh, we're so sorry for emitting all these carbon emissions. We'll shut down our facility. We'll go ESG, whatever, or we'll donate to your nonprofit, whatever scam you're operating. And instead we said, actually, no. Actually, the New York Times is wrong. We have zero emissions. And we made fun of them, right? Mm-hmm. Because obviously the emissions come from natural gas power plants, not from Bitcoin mining facilities. And so they're bucking up the wrong tree. I think that really changed the narrative around Bitcoin mining, where before people were talking about, oh, no, it's low emissions, right? Oh, we're using renewables. Now the industry kind of got a backbone and said, okay, all right, we have nothing to apologize for. We're not going to back down. We're not going to negotiate. Carbon emissions are already regulated by the EPA. So there's nothing to do here from a regulatory perspective. So I think I drove the football down the field pretty well on the carbon emissions question with that video that went extremely viral. And then Elizabeth Warren posted the New York Times article, and then I just hit her back with the video again, another brutal ratio. And then we never heard about it again. So I think that they got knocked on their heels. You don't want to get ratioed that often as a politician.
Yeah, you were the right man for the right time, and you completely flipped the frame, right? You did not play by their rules. You did not play their game. You reframed it and made it a completely different argument, and thus won. So absolutely amazing work done by you there. So going from the godfather of one of the largest lightning nodes to ratioing Elizabeth Warren, and now you are the CEO of the Bitcoin bond company. So you are in the financial aspect of Bitcoin. What is the Bitcoin bond company? What do you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I saw is as we had this massive victory and the Bitcoin price shot up, and I saw the huge appetite in capital markets for Bitcoin-backed instruments that were being pioneered by Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy, now Strategy. And so I thought a lot about, okay, what's something that Mr. Saylor is not doing that I could be doing? And I thought back to where I started my career out in accounting. I was auditing mortgage-backed securities. And the whole premise behind a mortgage-backed security is that you kind of tranche up the risk, right? This was made famous in the financial crisis with all of these securitized products. But my experience in the industry was that, and this was after the financial crisis, it's that the mortgage-backed securities did not cause the financial crisis. The Federal Reserve did. And so the technology, the financial technology of structuring risk and return is actually quite sound. It just has to be used responsibly. And that this is actually an area where Mr. Saylor has zero interest in participating, right? Because he's purely focused on equities. So he's got the common stock MSTR. He had the convertible notes. He's slowly equitizing them. And then he has the preferred equity, which is what he's using as his fixed income instrument. And so the reason why he's approaching it this way is because of really path dependency, right? That he started out as a common stock MSTR shareholder. And so all of the economic decisions he's going to make are to maximize the value for the MSTR shareholders. And that makes total sense, right? So he wants to maintain as much of the upside for the MSTR shareholders. And he wants to have infinite duration because the corporate form is that of a going concern, right? It has infinite life. I don't have those constraints. And so what the Bitcoin bond company is really has set out to do as its mission is to bring Bitcoin-backed securities to markets in the fixed income world where they want to have a maturity. They want the Bitcoin to be liquidated and sold, and they want to get a return of principal and interest in dollars. And so that's obviously something that MSTR can't do. And so that to me is a greenfield opportunity to be able to implement that and to ultimately just drive more capital into Bitcoin, right? Different forms of capital need different wrappers around Bitcoin in order to be able to access it, whether it's IBIT or MSTR or IBIT options or CME futures on Bitcoin, right? There's all these different financial wrappers around Bitcoin that provide different trade-offs. What we haven't seen is the asset-backed securities wrapper be applied to Bitcoin directly and really be able to, for everybody who invests in asset-backed securities, that they would actually be able to include that in their portfolio and start to build up Bitcoin exposure. A lot of these are like pension funds, right? Insurance companies, all sorts of different institutional investors that have a mandate to invest in self-liquidating notes, right? And maybe they have a 5-year or 7-year duration, which is great for Bitcoin, right? I mean, if you're targeting 5 to 10 years, I think that over 5 to 10 years, on average, Bitcoin goes up in value. And so I think that these are investors. Their mindset is very different from like the crypto traders. So they operate on years and decades. They don't operate on like days and weeks and months. So they're looking for a completely different product. And that's, what the Bitcoin Bond Company has set out to accomplish. Lots of activity on the back end. Lots of, I think that a product like this that's for institutional investors ultimately doesn't benefit from a whole lot of Twitter noise, right? It's about having phone calls and having meetings with real people, and it's a high trust business, right? And I think that that's complementary to Bitcoin because ultimately Bitcoin's the trust minimized monetary system, and that it creates a space for a financial system on top of it that is high trust, right? And so it involves human beings knowing each other, and so that's where I think that my track record in the Bitcoin space makes me personally, in all humility, somebody who might be more trustworthy than somebody who's found out about Bitcoin last week and is interested in crypto Web3 tokenization or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. And so what are those conversations with the pension funds like? Are they open to Bitcoin? Do they see this as a great new opportunity for themselves?
Absolutely. So 99% of them don't think anything of Bitcoin, or they don't like Bitcoin, or they're watching Bitcoin, or they're very passive on it, right? And they're very conservative. They see it as tulips. That's fine. That's great. Set them aside. I'm looking at the 1% who, when I pitch them on this, they're like, all right, Pierre, how do we partner together? How do we work together? How do we make this happen, right? So I think that there's this massive barbell distribution, but if you think about $400 trillion of fixed income out there, let's say 1% of that is $4 trillion. Bitcoin's market cap is $1.5 trillion. So and the year is 2026. So I think that as we build up a track record of being able to launch these vehicles and get these notes out in the market, then the other 99%, they're going to look at the performance of it, right? And so they're going to evaluate that performance over 5 to 10 to 20 years. And then they'll see that track record, and that's when they'll jump on board, right? So I think that it's just going to snowball from here, and that all that's needed is a kind of the first customers, right? Mm-hmm. If there was no first customers, you would never have heard of the Bitcoin Bond Company, right? It would have been a non-starter. But if there are first customers, then I'm really excited about the roadmap and the path ahead.
And just from a entrepreneur standpoint, what goes into running a business like this? Is it a one-man show, or do you have a team with you? What's it like running it itself?
It's really a team that is very much leaning on all of the external parties, right? Because legal counsel, Yeah, I could have in-house legal counsel, but there's actually lots of great law firms out there that can handle that work without me having to hire a full-time lawyer. Same thing with the accountants. Same thing with trustees, transfer agents, third-party custodians. So there's all these vendors out there that are very interested in working together to develop products like this. And then on the sales side, it's really leaning on investment banks, right? Where investment banking partners have the right licensing with the SEC in order to be able to bring a transaction like this in front of institutional investors in a way that is fully compliant. It's a chain of trust, right? These institutional investors, they trust the investment bankers. They've worked with them on past transactions, hundreds of past transactions for trillions of dollars, right? And so this is a new product that then is part of that work stream. And then, of course, there's all the investment consultants out there who their job is to look for new products out there and kind of evaluate them independently for institutional investors and then make a recommendation of, yeah, you should meet with Pierre. He's working on something really interesting here and kind of making introductions. So there's a whole stack of different, stakeholders in this. But until something breaks on my end, thank God I don't need to hire lots of people. Instead, it's really about finding the right partners to partner with.
Very cool. And as we close out this conversation here, you with 13 years of experience in Bitcoin, what is most surprising to you about where we are today, right now?
Wow. What's most surprising, I think, is just how many people still don't get it, right? Mm-hmm. There's people, I've known their names for now a decade, and they still haven't changed their mind in the face of so much obvious success. And so there's that. The other is there's a lot of Bitcoiners that they don't understand how much Bitcoin won in 24. And I speak from a U.S. perspective. I understand that there's jurisdictions out there like North Korea where, yes, Bitcoin has not won, right? Or Europe, right? Bitcoin has not won yet. But here in the U.S., it's the government is controlled by Bitcoiners. And so I think that Bitcoiners are uncomfortable with this. Last year, we were revolutionaries. Now we are part of the governing class. So it's kind of a culture shock. And a lot of European Bitcoiners, they look at it from the outside and they're like, oh, the American Bitcoiners have sold out, or they've become bootlickers or something. It's no, you don't understand. We captured the government. That's what you guys should be doing. What are you doing? Don't let the government capture you. So it's really kind of funny to see on social media the geographic contrast between the foreign losers and the domestic winners.
Yeah, and it does seem as if when Bitcoin has that common external enemy, we tend to unite. And when we do have all this winning, we sort of infight, right? And I think that's sort of been the story of the last year. We won big in 25, in the election, of course, of 24. And now we've got a bunch of time to sit around and fight with ourselves. So it's a different dynamic. Yes. Well, Pierre, I mean, this was an awesome run through of the last 13 years and how you've touched so many different aspects of Bitcoin. If people want to find out more about you, what you're working on, where should they go?
Just follow me on X at Bitcoin Pierre.
Cheers. Absolutely. Yes. And check out one of his many podcasts. He's got them on weeklies, monthlies, and yearly schedules. So wonderful. Always something to learn from you. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Rob.
Thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you could drop a like and a share, it would help in our mission to accelerate adoption. If you're looking for more Bitcoin signal, join over 10,000 readers of our newsletter, Bitcoin News Weekly. Every Monday morning, we send out the biggest headlines of Bitcoin to keep you in the know in under 5 minutes. Links below in the description. Then come hang with us live every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We break it all down live on stream with a new guest, and you can add your 2 sats in the chat. See you next week.